Now, the Fed opted to leave interest rates unchanged, making the announcement after that FOMC meeting yesterday, but also making it clear that the Fed is ready to make a cut if trade tensions continue to hurt the economy. Still, Fed Chair Jay Powell told reporters the Fed doesn't want to move too fast, especially with information still coming in.
We want to see and we want to react to developments and trends that are sustained, that are genuine, and not react just to data points or just to changes in sentiment, which can be volatile. At the same time, we're quite mindful of the risks to the outlook, and are prepared to move and use our tools as needed to sustain the expansion.
There you have it. And Yahoo Finance's Brian Cheung was in the room yesterday with Powell. Also got to ask him a question.
Yep.
And he's here now. Well, were you surprised by anything that came out of yesterday? It kind of seems like a lot was said and also nothing new was said.
Well, I think the actually surprising thing was that Chairman Powell was really harping quite a lot on the dot plot. So the dot plot projections really caught the most amount of waves because even though the Fed didn't move, the dot plots, which are a projection for what rate policy members kind of see as the rate path in the next 3 years and in the long run, you can see that the projection for 2019 shows 8 members seeing a case for at least one rate cut by the end of this year. Now, what's interesting, too, is that 8 members saw them staying the same, right? So 8 members see that by the end of this year, we won't have any rate cuts or rate hikes. But in the press conference, Powell said that a lot of these members who voted for keeping rates the same through the rest of this year still see downside risks. So if anything, that is the biggest takeaway for why some might characterize yesterday's meeting as having the dovish tone and maybe setting up a rate cut in July.
Now, if we could show the dot plot again, I want to ask a question about this. I don't want us to get too wonky, but it is fun to look at. It's fun to parse through. Yeah. Now, of course, let's remind viewers that the Fed didn't start putting this out until 2012, and some people think it's going to go away and that too much is made of it. But what's interesting here is we hear so many guests coming through now, and just because of what Powell said 2 weeks ago, saying we're going to get a cut before the end of the year, probably in July. But as you can see, as you said, half of the anonymous members here saying no cut, and yet who's that one saying a hike?
A hike, yes.
So just so the viewers understand, if you look at 2019 right now, that dot at the very top is some anonymous member saying, no, we should raise rates again, which, what? That's not going to happen.
This is my favorite part about covering the Fed. This is as visual as it's going to get. This is as visual as it's going to get covering the Fed. But there are 17 members, as you mentioned. So 8 said no changes by the end of this year. 8 said at least one rate cut. But there's that one dot that shows a hike. And it's interesting, though, because you would tend to think that that's the same member that's voting for what we see as maybe even 3 rate hikes by the end of 2021. Yep. So it's interesting. We don't know who it is. Some speculate it might be Esther George, who is the member of the Kansas City Fed, who has had a tendency to be a little bit more hawkish. But what the beauty of all this, or the downside of all this, is that we don't know who those members are. And
but you're naming names.
We're dropping something. I said maybe, but there's a lot of palace intrigue. I'm not the only one doing this. I mean, the Wall Street analysts are laboring hard over which dot is who, and most importantly, which one is Powell's dot. We don't know.
And you're in the room, so quick question. President Trump, was he looming in the atmosphere? Was there things that Fed Powell said that you were like, oh, that's in reference to what President Trump tweeted?
He was asked directly.
He was asked
directly whether what he would do if he was demoted or Trump tried to demote him.
So there were 2 questions. The first was about what would happen if President Trump called you and said, I want to demote you, or I'm demoting you. And Powell said, I plan to stay for my entire 4-year term. So again, Fed chairs are appointed for 4-year terms, and it's not so clear legally if President Trump can even demote him to a governor's role anyway. So Powell, without directly saying anything to the president, saying, I'm going to stay in my post. The second question was kind of a little bit more nuanced. I thought it was a great question from Victoria Guida at Politico, asking, look, do you think that you have the same goals as the president in terms of economic policy? Which is kind of a roundabout way of asking, well, at the same time, the Fed and the White House should have the same ideas in terms of getting fiscal policy and monetary policy to boost the economy, to make GDP grow. But it's also kind of a masked way of saying, do you and the president kind of get along here? Right. And Powell said, I don't answer any questions, or I'm not going to address my relationship with other people. Pretty much in line with, I didn't expect him to come out there and just start trash talking Trump. Exactly.
Being diplomatic.
Exactly. So, nothing new there, but it definitely was the looming cloud, and that's why we had 2 questions on it.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you pointing out the palace intrigue that I think a lot of people don't necessarily recognize that there is to the Fed right now. So good
stuff.
stuff.
Often something we talk about when it comes to the Fed.
Yeah.
Again, it adds a little bit of spice.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Good spice. Thanks, Brian Cheung.